This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. I hope you're all enjoying a good week. I'm back from a short break in the lovely countryside near Barnard Castle in County Durham. It's certainly feeling like summer's arrived this last week or so, with improved temperatures and plenty of sunshine, which is fantastic. Today, we're going to be talking about a not so sunny topic, however, managing pain. For anyone who knows me well, they'd be well aware that this is a topic which is close to my heart due to my own personal injury record. A slipped disc in my back has had a big impact on my life for almost 10 years now, where I'm frequently in pain on a day-to-day basis, and when I play golf, it's jeopardized my plans to build on running 3 marathons in my 30s and continue the adventurous theme by taking part in other endurance event challenges. It's been frustrating, and my guest knows all about this topic too, and this frustration. Keagen Hadley has gone on to write an excellent book on the topic, and today he goes on to share the motivation behind his book, Torn, Overcoming the Psychological Challenges Post-ACL Injury. He talks about his definition of mental toughness in this situation where you do have a long-term injury. We chat about helpful tools to manage pain and mental health, including ACT, Acceptance Commitment Therapy. Enjoy. Hi, Keagan. It's great to meet you and finally put a name to a face. Would you like to explain to the listeners a little bit about your background?
Yep, sure. It's great to be here, David. I am a psychiatric and neurological clinical researcher at a pharmaceutical company, and I'm also a doctor of occupational therapy, specializing in the psychology of sports injuries. Excellent.
And obviously you've got a book which is called Torn, Overcoming Psychological Challenges Post-ACL Injury. So what was the motivation for writing the book?
Yeah. So I didn't intend to actually write a book in the beginning. So it was kind of a cathartic process for me to just get everything out that I had went through. And this was already after I had found ACT, and it had very much changed my life. So I was just getting it out, all the, experiences I went through. And then after all the research on ACT and going through, a couple of years of therapy with them, just putting it to work and seeing how maybe, my journey with ACT, could benefit others. And after I, quickly accumulated like 150 or so references and, all my own personal experiences, I felt, I might have something here, and it came together rather quickly.
Excellent. And so I believe you've had two big long-term injuries with ACLs. I'm guessing that provided the part of the motivation there to get this down on paper.
Yeah. So I tore both of my ACLs once. It required 4 surgeries in total to, you have the reconstruction, and then for whatever reason, both of mine required a revision surgery as well. So I had tons of experience just from the injury standpoint, but not only that, it's all the psychological impact that these injuries have on you, that kind of percolates through your entire life, really. So it definitely, it led me down a path that, we can discuss more if you like, but it kind of culminated in me making a series of bad choices, whether that was through poor coping, bad relationship decisions that led me to, start dating an individual who I would find out was a pretty severe alcoholic. And I went through quite a bit of emotional abuse in that situation, which is actually what pushed me to find ACT. I didn't find ACT just from tearing my ACLs. I like to joke that I don't really learn that quickly. I have to learn through, doing something very, very wrong before I go down the right path. So
do you want to expand a little bit further on some of those struggles there with regards to, I suppose, the yes, the injuries and obviously the relationship as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So as far as the physical injuries, as many athletes would tell you, their identity is very much wrapped into their sport. But not only that, it's also their self-esteem. It's, the main source of their confidence. And if that is removed, especially if it's an injury where it takes an extended period of time to get back, like an ACL injury or an Achilles injury, it's, very frustrating and, maddening, and it causes a lot of internal struggle. It's without any of the skills that I accumulated due to that emotional abuse situation, because that was much after it, a couple of years after it. I was really in a dark place as far as I had no idea how to really go through all these feelings, having to watch, other people in my spot and, having to watch games and all those kinds of things that, are very common for individuals who, have a sports injury.
Did you find you wanted to distance yourself from the team environment, or were you still trying to stay amongst your colleagues and teammates?
So I lived with, a number of teammates, so I could never fully get away. It's definitely normal to want to get away just because it's so painful. It's common practice now to, you tear your ACL or tear something. If you tear it on a Tuesday, on Wednesday, you are, at practice and you're having to watch essentially while you're getting confirmation that yes, indeed you did, tear your ACL, tear your Achilles, or whatever the case may be. And it's very difficult because you want to be there. You love your teammates. You love the sport, but it's also one of the more painful parts about these injuries is having to sit there and watch other people do what you love to do.
Yeah, because I would imagine just being involved in the group, and we're talking about American football here, aren't we? The sport, being involved in the group, you would have the banter and the celebrating successes, challenging each other and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't feel a part of.
No, I mean, you're there and you always get acknowledged. Like I still had people, come up to me and talk to me at practice and all that kinds of stuff. But as far as the, overall environment and really being able to appreciate it and truly be a part of it, you can't just be unfortunately, you can't be the injured individual on the sidelines. It's people want to believe it's the same, but it's not the same.
Is it fair to say as well, when you're in that type of environment as well, it's a little bit like a bubble where, unless you're fortunate enough to have like lots of other friendship groups and other things, which I know can be difficult in a sporting environment because you can place so much time and resources on that chosen sport. Yeah,
you're pretty much. I mean, I had a couple friends that weren't on the football team, but a majority of the people I was around or hung out with not only were football players, but maybe they were, in another sport. So everyone's doing what they love to do, essentially. And you're kind of just on the outs. And, it's you're happy for everyone. You want them to do the best they can, but it also the whole time it definitely hurts.
Would you get caught up in the thought process of, I suppose, like the what if and where you're getting ahead of yourself often?
Yep. Looking forward, looking backward. Essentially, when you're in that rehabilitation phase, you're unfortunately living everywhere but where you are right now. You're looking ahead to, I hope I can, get back to where I was. You're looking back to, I wish, what if I would have done this the day before? Maybe I wouldn't have, torn my ACL. So life is very full of those kinds of thoughts. And without any of the ACT skills, you definitely perseverate in those, what ifs.
And I imagine you get caught up in comparisons as well, comparing yourself to different friends and teammates and what's going on in their lives as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because you only have more time. You have so much more time when you're not having to, do all the things necessary physically to get ready for practice and all those kinds of stuff. So you have, copious amounts of time to, ruminate on all the comparisons on, I don't know if I'll, I don't look like that anymore, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Obviously, the name of this podcast is called Demystifying Mental Toughness. So I'm curious as to, how you would define mental toughness in this type of situation when you've got a long-term injury you're trying to overcome.
So a lot of people, especially within sports, would term mental toughness as far as, at least conventionally, not within the sports psych community, but in a conventional, just especially male sport, it would be kind of like rub some dirt on it. You're fine. Those kinds of things that toughen up. But I think being able to sit with those difficult feelings and really learn from them, and help them improve who you are as a person and as an athlete is how I would term mental toughness. And it's how I, help my clients.
Yeah, I really like that definition there. I'm going to take you back, and we'll break down some of the little elements of mental toughness. So you touched on how your self-esteem would be affected in this situation and was affected. So an element of mental toughness is essentially it's life control, which is having a can-do attitude, feeling in control of your destiny. And that's obviously ripped to shreds, isn't it, at that point? So what type of goals would you set yourself in the rehabilitation process to try and bring that back and feel that little bit better in yourself?
What did I do, or what would I have done looking back now that I have?
Well, a bit of both, I suppose. If we're looking at the little goals that you did set, and potentially now knowing what you know would have set.
So what I did set was they were all strictly physical goals, which is fine, and it's very normal if you have a physical injury for them all to be physical. But I think what would benefit a lot of athletes, especially in the time period where maybe they just had surgery or maybe they're waiting for surgery and they've kind of done all they can do, is to look in other areas to improve yourself as an athlete. So a lot of the psychological flexibility processes have actually been shown to improve athletic performance. So I think it's a fantastic time to not only start, making sure that your muscles are as strong as possible for surgery or right after surgery, but also, working in other areas that could improve your, athletic performance in the future. I think that's huge. And that's what I would have done if I would have had the knowledge I do now. Yeah, that's what I would say.
How would you have gone about that then? Where you say you would have looked at other areas? What, feel free to share with the listeners what other areas you would have looked at.
So one of my issues personally, and a lot of the issues I see with my clients, is they have a lot of cognitive fusion, which is essentially, it is like when you have an emotion, a lot of people tend to use the verbiage, I am sad, I am mad. And that's called cognitive fusion. You're essentially fusing with your thoughts. And one of the first skills of ACT is diffusion. And it gives you that space to evaluate your thoughts and kind of decide whether or not it's a useful or a not useful thought. So an example of that would be, I'll use my own personal example, through my experiences, is I have a perseverative thought that is, I am broken. Whether that's my severe anxiety or, through the emotional abuse or my physical injuries, I always had the I am broken thought. And after I went through ACT, I was able to make that first step, that first little bit of progress, which was changing it from I am broken to I am having thoughts or feelings that I'm broken. I am, myself, not broken. Those are just thoughts. And, we can't control thoughts no matter how much we want to believe that. We think all kinds of crazy things every day, but getting to, evaluate whether or not that thought is useful is a very, very important skill.
So essentially, in order to manage those real lows and with your emotions there, you've distanced yourself from those thoughts by using ACT. I'm aware for the listeners, those that do not know what ACT is, and we've just literally just jumped in there. We've got acceptance commitment therapy. Mm-hmm. Do you want to just give a brief summary there around, ACT first, and then we'll dig in a little bit deeper?
Yeah. So a lot of your audience is probably very familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. That's a very common psychotherapeutic modality. And what I would say is it's very much like that, except for CBT posits that, if I'm thinking I am torn, I'll keep with that same example. If I just mindfully change that thought to a positive one, or redirect that thought to a positive one, that's all it's really looking to do, is it focuses primarily on getting rid of the negative symptomology associated with your mental struggles. And I had a very difficult time with that, especially as an athlete. If you or a therapist were to tell me, hey, don't think I am broken, think, about your favorite pie or your favorite vacation place or whatever the case may be, I couldn't not look at it. It's like I am one of those kind of people. If you say, hey, don't look over here, I will look over there, and I'll repeatedly look over there. And that's the same thing with my thoughts. So it was able to, it has different goals. So it's not trying to reduce, feeling bad, because feeling bad is part of life, and it's learning to sit with those negative feelings and grow from it. And what can you learn from that? Because pain and hurt are very, very important to the human condition. It tells you what you love, because you're only having internal pain if it's, you lost something you love. And if you're able to evaluate that and learn from that situation, you can only grow as an athlete or as a person.
Would it be fair to say that going through difficulties and like real struggles and difficulties actually in effect forces you to sit down and actually learn from these episodes, whereas a lot of athletes won't necessarily feel those deep emotions and those sort of traumatic responses, and it might explain why they often don't learn from mistakes, certainly from a performance context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I definitely think it does. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we digressed a little bit there. Mm-hmm. Did you ever find it difficult to open out and actually, talk about these feelings and thoughts? Or did it take you a while to seek some support?
Yeah. So, like I said, I didn't learn any of this just from the physical injuries. That, unfortunately wasn't enough for me to learn any of these skills. But after I was going through that emotionally abusive relationship, like I said, became suicidal for a period of, a number of months, and, was able to gain the strength to get out of that relationship. And then shortly after, I knew if I didn't change what I was doing, my life was not going to go in the direction I wanted. So that's when I sought out help from a therapist, which is when the CBT came in, and I was extremely frustrated because I felt like I was doing everything I needed to, but I just wasn't making any traction mentally. But I think unless you're able to realize that, a physical injury, or even if it doesn't feel like it's super traumatic, you still have to deal with those things mentally, because it's my opinion that you can either handle the little stuff, or you will be forced to handle the bigger stuff later down the line, which was more of my case.
In some ways, again, if we're thinking about mental toughness here, it's you're actually more mentally tough by facing your problems and your issues at that time, aren't you, than skirting and then running away and I don't know, perhaps doing something else, or coping using alcohol or drugs or whatever it is.
Yeah. Now, with hindsight being 2020, it's much. It shows a lot more strength to sit with negative emotions and, really get past them than it does just pretending they don't exist. So
in terms of ACT, do you want to share a little bit more about your book and how you talk about ACT in the book, and, elaborate on what you've talked about earlier?
Yeah, of course. So ACT, in my book, I go through my kind of experience as an athlete. I start my freshman year of high school, which is when I started to get really severe anxiety. And I go through my second ACL tear, which happened at a Canadian Football League private tryout in Ohio. So I go through that entire range. And then also after with, I couldn't write this book without the dating the alcoholic and the situations that occurred due to that. So I take kind of the reader through those situations, stories, and then I talk about, I have like a story portion, and then I go into, how ACT could have alleviated a lot of the issues I was going through at the time.
Do you want to share a little bit about some specific tools that?
Yeah. So diffusion was kind of my first step that we already spoke about, but another one was acceptance was very huge. Learning to sit with, the difficult emotions. I have anxiety. It kind of shows up in my chest, I suppose. So one of the things I learned was obviously when a lot of people think of acceptance, they kind of think of, be quiet, sit in the corner and, those kinds of things. But in ACT, that's definitely not the case. ACT kind of wants you to sit there with the difficult emotion, and you'll realize once you start to do that, it's more of a grounding technique. So, for example, my anxiety, I can feel it pretty much wholly within my chest. It somewhat feels like a heart attack if I don't, address it, and I focus on that point, and then once it kind of subsides a little bit, you get better to where you can start moving your awareness to your feet, or I usually do my feet, but a lot of my clients prefer their hands or maybe their rear end if they're sitting on something, and those kinds of things. There's all kinds of different techniques you can use, but for acceptance, in the feelings you're going through, grounding techniques are very, very beneficial.
So in effect, it's a type of meditation that you're talking about there. So I'm just thinking if somebody can't really picture going through that, if they had a physical injury, say they've got a tight calf, for argument's sake, and again they could do a similar thing, couldn't they, where they could sit and like picture and shift their focus into that tight calf, and then try to, over a period of time, I suppose, deeply like soften and relax the muscle as opposed to feeling it tightening up. Is that an effective summary or not so?
No, yeah. You'll find that the more you don't hide from or try to avoid those difficult feelings, actually you're minimizing their effect on you. So when we try to avoid, like my anxiety, when I would do whatever I could to not feel those sensations in my chest or anything like that, it was almost giving them more power. Like, it's kind of like not confronting a bully or something and just, skirting around the edges of the playground rather than, confronting them. And many times, and especially with anxiety, it's not as big a bully as you might initially think.
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite scary though, initially. And it's something that you're going to have some patience to be able to manage and to make it work for yourself. Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more.
So in life in general and in sport, people can often fall into the trap of, like, when they come to seek help, that they just want to pop a pill in effect. But the reality is, in this type of situation, if you're going to confront those feelings, it could well take a long, long time, and you've got to be willing to put the work in effect.
Yeah, you certainly do. It's a continual process. It's not like you said, like a magic pill or anything like that. I work on stuff to this day, but cultivating those skills gives you the faculties necessary to deal with a lot of these difficult feelings or emotions, and they get easier over time. Yes, the first time you have to really confront these difficult feelings, it is scary and it's difficult, but you'll realize once you do it, it's not as bad as what you're envisioning it will be. A lot of times people's thoughts on how difficult or how painful or how overwhelming it'll be it doesn't live up to that 99% of the time. So I mean that's been my experience with myself and my clients.
And essentially as well, I suppose if we rewind back about 20-25 minutes, we talked about how you can get caught up in future thinking and then going back to the past and a lot of comparisons and things like that. Essentially, a lot of these skills are actually trying to focus you on the moment, on the present, which is a nice place to be, essentially.
Yep. I make the quote in my book, live where your knees are. Yeah, but it solves a lot of our issues, not only for looking ahead and looking back and having those regrets or anxieties, but it also helps you, have purposeful action towards, the person you want to be, allocating your time appropriately. I mean, I think we can all agree that we spend too much time on our phones and those kinds of things in different activities that aren't really providing any benefit to our life. Like I'm personally working on that as we speak. I've gotten in the trap recently of, doing a lot more scrolling than I probably should. And I'm allocating that time back to my blog or, creating future content for my readers. So.
Yeah, no, I think, as you say, we all do from time to time. We just slip back into it. I know I go through a period where I try to put my phone onto airplane mode at about 8 o'clock, but then sometimes it's near 9:30, and yeah, it's good just to throw it in another room and get
That's tempting.
It's tempting for a while. So yeah, I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been fascinating. You've shared some great insights. I'm wondering if you can share with the listeners 3 takeaways that they can use going forwards.
Yeah, I think no matter what your situation is, you might not even think that you've went through a lot of trauma, or you maybe have never even considered it. But I would say taking a 10,000-foot overview of your life and addressing, any kind of struggles if you went through, and then also what you can take from those struggles would be a huge first step. Because a lot of the things that maybe we see as struggles and we maybe have not dug into could provide, nuggets of knowledge or wisdom for future situations. I see that for myself all the time, whether that's, from one client to another or my own personal struggles. Another one that I would say we've kind of reiterated numerous times is, live in the moment. If you're with your family, truly be with your family. Well, if you're just scrolling away, I mean, you're physically there, but you're not mentally there. And the last one is, again, I'll leave with kind of the first step that got me out of being, in the darkest place I've ever been in my life was realize that just because you think something does not mean it is true. Allow yourself to evaluate the thought and realize that, if it's not helpful to where you want to go, your own personal values, it's not worth, clinging to, and just keep on keeping on.
It's excellent. That is. Can I just add one little thing to it? I would imagine by using ACT and by talking to people as well, it helps you actually be grateful for what you do actually have, as opposed to getting caught up in the stuff that you don't have, essentially, and the things that you can't do. I don't know. I know I'm someone who practices gratitudes on a regular basis. I don't know. Are you?
Yeah, I don't practice it per se, but it definitely gives you, if you're living in the moment and you're not overstimulated with all the technology or whatever else, you're able to truly witness and live in the moment. And you do, by doing that, you do naturally have a lot more gratitude, or you notice a lot more that's been very beneficial in my life and my relationships. And it's made me able to, thank my girlfriend for doing, special things for me that maybe if I was engrossed in my phone or, work emails that I maybe would not have noticed, and those types of things. And it just makes life a lot more meaningful.
Yeah, most definitely. I reiterate that one. So if the listeners would like to get in touch with you or read your book, do you want to just share your contact details?
Yeah. The easiest way to get a hold of me is at theacltherapist.com. I am very, very active on there. I write a blog post a day. So there, and then all my contact information, you can find the link to the book through the website, or you can find it at Amazon. It's Torn, Overcoming the Psychological Challenges Post-ACL Injury.
Excellent. A blog a day. I thought I've done well. I've released a podcast episode once a week for 2 years now, and pretty much written a blog a day, but not a blog a week for 4 years. I thought that was impressive, but a blog a day, wow, hats off to you.
Yep. It's trying to build it up quick.
Yeah, why not? And yeah, I mean, obviously it's really helpful as well for people. So yeah, please feel free to have a look at Keagan's website, and there's lots of advice there and some fantastic blogs. So yeah, a big thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Many athletes suffer from ACL injuries and other long-term injuries, which can have a big impact on their mental health, relationships, and lives in general. And it was sad to hear about Keagan's journey, but also very inspiring to see that he's put his experiences and his knowledge down on paper to help people. I sincerely hope that if you're in this situation, that you found this episode useful, and that you do consider seeking professional help if you are struggling or merely surviving. As they say, a problem shared is a problem halved. And as you may have heard in various podcast episodes that I've recorded in the past with Amy Iskey and James Lau, I'll reiterate that as sports psychologists, we all do work a little bit differently. Some will only look at performance issues. Some will be sufficiently trained, like myself, in mental health at a lower level and have an understanding of counselling skills. Others will have specialist mental health training and perhaps also operate as clinical or counselling psychologists alongside their role as a sports psychologist. In our role, it's important to recognise your skill set. If issues are deep-rooted and I feel out of my depth, where depression and anxiety are suspected, I'd refer it to a colleague who's a clinical psychologist and someone who has specialist mental health training. The way I see my role is predominantly to help athletes and coaches to improve their performance by mentally preparing them. However, in some situations like long-term injuries and personal difficulties off the pitch or the course, there can sometimes be conversations about helping athletes and coaches to ensure that their well-being remains intact. And for people who are struggling with mental health issues, my advice is to do your homework. Make sure the professional that is supporting you or that you're reaching out to is fully trained and qualified. Should you wish to connect with me or other professionals in this field, or ask any questions on this topic or other topics in the field of sports psychology, I'd love to see you joining our growing community, the Sports Psychology Hub. Details are in the show notes. Enjoy your week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.